around town and the margins of town.
WCOM LP, Chapel Hill, Carborough.
Hello, hello. Good afternoon, Carborough. Welcome to the Carborian Radio Hour on WCOM 103.5. This is our first show in our regular time slot, Mondays, 4 to 5. My name is Jennifer Yorkovich. I'm the editor and publisher of the Carborian, a new monthly free print newspaper that's for, by, and about people who live in, work in, and visit Carborough. That newspaper is available around town and the margins of town, Chapel Hill, Hillsborough, and Pittsboro, and you can check us out online at thecarborian.com. I am delighted to be joined by Al Julian today, longtime Carborough resident and author of a new book, Shadow Men, which we'll be talking about today. Welcome, Al.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for having me on the show.
We're delighted you're here. So, Al, let's start with you as a Carborian. You are a longtime Carborough resident. What brought you to this area, and why have you stayed so long?
I came about 34 years ago. I was in the midst of one of my many crises, midlife crises. I decided to change careers. I'd been a practicing clinical psychologist for about 15 years and had come to realize slowly over time that sitting in a room and listening and taking maybe a year or two to get through a problem didn't fit as well with my kind of impulsive nature as it needed to for long term. So I came here to go to law school back in 1993 and finished law school here in 96, practiced law for a few years and stayed. Just like the town, like the atmosphere, like the college.
Great. I think that's kind of a quintessential Carborough story, right? You come to learn and you end up staying.
True.
And you've had a really interesting and somewhat varied career through clinical psychology, law, forensics, and writing. Can you tell us about that, the arc of your career, and how all those things really come together in your writing?
Yeah. When I practiced psychology, I had some... I was kind of a jack of all trades in that profession. I did a number of things, including working at forensic hospitals, which are hospitals which we used to call hospitals for the criminally insane years ago, and now they're called forensic hospitals. We've kind of made it sound nicer. But I got to know a lot of very interesting characters there, which I think also eventually fed into some of my writing interests. But as I said, after years of working in clinical psychology, which I did like, and I felt like, I had some success with it, I decided I'd like to go into law and maybe think about, working in criminal law. It's one thing I'd considered, or international law was another one. Went to law school, ended up doing some work with local attorneys, some work again in forensics. I did some workups down at for pre-trial screenings, and so I did quite a bit of evaluations with people that were in some serious trouble. Did a couple full workups down on death row looking for mitigating circumstances, which was pretty interesting. But once again, I found myself spending a lot of time in a room, taking a year or so to get through a problem. And once again, it didn't fit my disposition as much as I'd like it to. And so I segued into doing forensic work, which was kind of a combination of the two, which did suit me more. In forensics, it was more of you asked to size up a situation. It could be a criminal or a civil situation or an individual. And give an opinion about what you think is happening and what ought to happen in the future, and basically deliver that opinion in writing or in court. But you were given a problem in a couple of weeks or a month, you'd have the problem done, and you're on to a new one. And I liked that. It fit my personality better. And I did that for about 10 years, and then did well at that, and met a lot of interesting people, a lot of interesting cases, a lot of fodder for what I do now, which is pretty much right. And I retired and began doing what I've come to really love. I think the first kind of job that I found in my life that I've truly thrive on, and that's writing, and I also produce films. So I do those two things. And the films that I've made pretty much reflect my background and some of the strange characters that I've known. So anyway, I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, of course, yeah. Fodder for your writing. Let's talk about that for a moment. Your writing of the scenes, when we see the victims, and even scenes with the violence being perpetrated at the time, the writing is so graphic. The reader is in that space with the detectives, is in that space seeing what they're seeing. We see the blood, we hear the slice of the blade through the flesh, and I'm wondering if these scenes are ones that you imagined when you were doing your forensics work, or things that you experienced.
That's a good question, and it's probably a combination of both of those things. When I was working in psychology, for 2 years I ran murderers groups, which were what they are, what they sound like, and that was groups for people that had killed other people. And I ran those for 2 years, and, those entailed oftentimes, graphic descriptions from the individuals in those groups as to what they'd done. And over the years, I've probably indirectly been privy to that kind of information, even information I didn't want. I can remember working in a forensic unit for a couple of years, running those murderers groups. I took a break, did some other psychological stuff, came back and thought I'd try a forensic job again, and I went to Walter Reed Hospital, and I got offered the job there to run the forensic unit. But I went down on that unit. I got offered the job after this experience, but I went down on the unit to meet the staff, and I took about 15 feet into that unit and realized I never want to do this again, because just the PTSD of having to dissociate from getting real involved with people that had done some terrible things was something I didn't want to do full time again. So there's a lot of this stuff that still rolls around in my mind, and I think probably there's some kind of relief to me, maybe, in getting it out on paper. There's some kind of tension relief, because there's a lot of imagery that stays with me that I don't particularly want.
And this helps get it out. Yeah, I can see that. Wow. I have so many questions about the murderers groups.
Please ask.
Okay, great. Great. When you're sitting there in the room, and there's let's say, how many people would there be? Maybe 7, 10?
That's probably about 7 typically, 7, 6, 7, 8.
So it's a group therapy type session.
Yes.
And people talk about what they're carrying around with them, their memories of committing these acts. And did you leave there with a sense that the group therapy made a difference for them? Was it indeed therapeutic for folks doing this, or that have done this? Did it help them move on with their life in a positive way?
I think in some cases, yes, and in some cases, no. I think that where we would get people in those groups from 3 different directions. One direction was straight from the prisons, where they had tried to harm themselves. Typically, one guy had tried to hang himself twice, and so he was referred to the facility. We'd get people directly from the court system that were found criminally insane, and then rather do a prison bid, they were sent to the forensic hospital, oftentimes for a life sentence. And then we had also what I would call manipulators, who had basically conned their way into this unit because it was a more pleasant place to be than prison. So we'd have those 3 types. And I think the ones that benefited the most were probably the ones that had, serious anxiety and depression related to what they'd done. I try not to give away the identities of people, but we had one. I'll change up the story a little bit. We had one guy that basically had discovered his partner in flagrant delicto and had shot them 6 times, and then reloaded their weapon and shot them 6 more times when they were on the floor. But within 30 minutes, this is a person they loved, and within 30 minutes they were extremely remorseful. And then in prison, the same person tried to kill himself twice for that. But anyway, that kind of person, I think, did benefit from the therapy, or somebody that was anxious. But we had other people that I didn't think benefited. We had some people, I think, that were more purely sociopathic, probably didn't benefit as much. But it was a fascinating experience for me. And actually, I made a TV pilot last year called The Sessions, which is based on those groups, and it's a 6-episode series. We made the first episode, and it's been doing real well on the festival circuit. It's been winning a lot of awards, so we'll see. We're trying to see if anybody wants to pick it up to make it all the way through.
Wow! Well, congratulations on the awards. I mean, that sounds like an interesting show. I'm going to look that up.
Not for the faint-hearted.
No. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that warning.
Sure.
Let's talk about your writing and the writers that have influenced your work. I think when we were speaking before, I mentioned that your work has a noir quality to it, and with the crime scenes and the characters, flawed. I mean, we're all flawed, but these characters, their flaws are front and center, and you can relate to them. It brings you into the story in a way that James Ellroy's work does that too. And then I mentioned to you going through these themes of male anger, which we'll talk about later. I felt like there was John Updike. His character, it reminded me of some of his characters and some of the themes that they wrestled with too. So, yeah, you're writing influencers.
Sure. Well, you mentioned two of them already. Updike, I love the Rabbit books, and I love the L.A. Confidential, and the Black Dahlia, I think, was another one that James Ellroy wrote.
Yes.
Great movie made from the L.A. Confidential, too, one of my favorites. Other people I've loved are Ian Ranklin, Joe Nesbo, and they write the same kind of... I feel like those particular writers must have had some experiences with the kind of the dark side of life to be able to write the way they do, because they're all really great. So those I think those have all influenced me in some respects. In terms of the anger or the dark side of things, it may be a phenomenon that's common to a lot of men. Certainly, it's something I wrestled with for a lot of my young life, and I won't get into all the details of my own upbringing, but it probably is the kind of upbringing that would lend itself to having some problems with anger. So I think some of those experiences that I talk about there are related to my own struggles with learning to manage myself better, and imagining what would happen if a person like me or with similar problems didn't learn to manage or choose to manage themselves better. And maybe that's what I'm saying, is that I have a little bit of one foot inside these characters and maybe one foot out. So I think part of me can relate a little bit to what I'm writing in terms of that's a little bit of me. And I guess I'm at the age where I can admit it. I can admit it without feeling too terrible about it. Well,
I'd like to give readers a kind of a preview of your writing about anger, because I found it, very, I don't want to keep using the word graphic, but you could feel what this person was feeling. So I'm going to ask you to read that here. It's on page.
Let me get my specs on here, and I'll take
page 130 for those of you following at home.
Okay.
In the second paragraph there,
He almost throttled him on the spot, but the hospital waiting area was half full, and he knew that once he started, he wouldn't be able to stop. He couldn't stop. The overwhelming rage. He felt like he was trying to contain a nuclear explosion.
One of many examples in the book, I think, where you're talking about an aging man's rage and reaction to things, and what, in your words today, what are they reacting to? What's really triggering this?
Okay. And I'll try to bring this again. There's probably lots of reasons for everybody, lots of different ways it comes. But for me, I think one thing I can kind of tie some of that emotion to is I remembered when I retired from the forensic work about 11 years ago now. I thought, boy, now I'm going to have fun. I'm going to write. I'm just going to travel. This is going to be great. And I really struggled for about a year or two, just with feelings of isolation, feelings that I was no longer that important to anybody, feelings that I was kind of being dismissed by society, which I think a lot of men go through. They say that retirement for men is the number one predictor of death in the first year, which I could understand. And so I think a lot of the frustration and some of the rage also stems from that experience. It took me about a year and a half to pull out of it, to really get righted. And I think one thing that really helped me was writing. And I think I wrote the first screenplay that this story was adapted from, that Shadow Men was adapted from, in that time. And that's the first screenplay that I actually wrote. And I've rewritten it a few times since then, but I think a lot of it was coming right from that kind of emotionality that I was having myself, as the two principal characters are also struggling with age. The protagonist and antagonist have a lot in common. Mm-hmm. They're both struggling with the phenomenon of not feeling that they're as relevant to society anymore, but they're handling it in very different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But ultimately self-destructive.
Yes.
At least, yeah. So you mentioned the novel is adapted from a screenplay.
Right.
And often we hear that the other way around. A screenplay is adapted from novel. How is writing the novel different for you? So you had the screenplay, which I know is filled with stage direction and, in italics, the scene setting, that sort of thing, before dialogue takes place. And what was it? Can you tell us a bit about that process of writing the novel?
Sure. I think it's really fascinating for me. I started writing screenplays about 11 years ago, and it was really hard for me to do. And it took me, this particular screenplay took me over a year to write this. And to give it, the last screenplay I wrote was a summer before last. It took me about 4 weeks,
wow.
which is more typical, I think. Huh. But what I found interesting is I thought, well, I'd written some short stories long ago and never did anything with them, just threw them in a drawer and forgot about them. That's my only attempt at narrative writing, but outside of poetry, I've had a few little ditties published around here, but poetry's a different genre altogether. But I thought, wow, I don't know if I can do this or not. But what I found in screenplay writing, you can only write about what you can sense, what you can see, feel, hear, or touch. You can't write about anything you can't experience. So you can't write about anything that's going on in a person's head. And so that's the number one difference in writing narrative and writing screenplays. When you write narrative, most narrative is like 50% inner dialogue, or what's going on internally inside of a person. And John felt slighted, so blah, blah. But, you can't write that in a screenplay. You have to show it somehow or sense it otherwise. So anyway, I thought, well, this is going to be, actually, I guess what I'm getting around to is, for me, it was easier. I think it's easier to write narrative now than it is to write a screenplay, because you have the luxury of going inside your character, whereas in a screenplay you do not.
Yeah, so it's a different way of developing a character. Yeah. You're developing them through their thoughts.
Right.
I wonder if I could pass the book to you again and show us. This is page 245, chapter 33. And you can take it from the top, Al.
Where do you want me to thumb the top?
Yeah.
Just read the first paragraph?
This is really inside a character's head.
Right. He worked hard to keep his breathing steady and his mind clear. The people around him were such despicable clowns. They had consistently underestimated him his whole life. He'd chosen a path where he could minimize exposure to the useless opinions of those less skilled than he was, or less competent. He was the expert. He always had been. How dare anyone question his techniques, his decisions?
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. I think that's one of those examples of really being in their head. And I guess when you were writing the screenplay, as you're showing the viewer these things that are going on, and then you're sitting down to adapt that, it kind of gave you some freedom to go into these characters in a very different, to just develop them.
as you can see, just in that one paragraph that I just read, I was thinking to myself, how would I show that in a screenplay? And you can see that it'd be kind of difficult.
Yeah.
We just learned a lot about that character from his own inner dialogue. Mm-hmm. But if you didn't have that inner dialogue, you'd have to somehow convey to your audience, this is what the character's like.
Visually.
And
yeah.
It's not that easy.
So, should we expect more novels from you?
I am on my third one now. I'm on my third one now. I have a dystopian fantasy sci-fi novel that I just finished a few months back, and I got it illustrated. I'm writing another. This is like more of a dystopian thriller. I like sci-fi thrillers and I like mystery thrillers. So I'm on my third one. But I'm also, as I said, I'm a filmmaker too. So one thing I'm doing with Shadow Men is I'm in very early pre-production of a movie, which we're planning. I have a director. His name is Rob Underhill. I've made several films with Rob before. We have one on a bunch of TV stations now called Fever Dreams, which is an anthology of thrillers, some of them similar to, based on three of the stories I wrote of the four. But we're planning on making a film out of Shadow Men. We're going to set some of it in Carrboro. So, and we'll be soliciting Carrboro actors and crew, and
How exciting!
Yeah.
All right, Carrborians, stay tuned for that. Your casting call is coming.
It is probably early next year.
Early 2026. Oh, that's exciting. So, Fever Dreams, you mentioned, and I believe it's streaming on Apple, Amazon Prime, and Tubi. Thanks.
I think it's also on, let's say, their YouTube. They've got a thriller station on YouTube. I don't know what it's called, but it's on there too.
All right. And Fever Dreams is a full-length film.
It's a short. It's like 80 minute feature film.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting. All right. So speaking of Carrboro, are there any ways that living in Carrboro has affected your writing, influenced your writing in any way?
Probably it's been you're asking me questions that will make me think, which is good. Probably in a way that you wouldn't, that I don't. That's interesting. Yes, I think probably by being a very calm place to live, it helps me, as I tend to be. I think just by virtue of all the things I've done. I think I carry around a lot of PTSD by virtue of my own childhood experiences, and a lot of the work I've done has been pretty scary. I've spent a lot of times in prisons, and I've known a lot of, kind of scary people. But this is a very nice, calm, relaxed environment, and I think that's allowed me to calm down and relax, and maybe put some of these experiences to pen in a way that maybe I couldn't have done before. I would have been too wound up. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't really thought about that before, but I think maybe it's been helpful. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's part of the reason I'm still here.
I can see that. Yeah. I can see that because the characters in Shadow Men are unhappy. Yes. Many are unhappy, and you do a good job of describing the circumstances of their lives and why they are unhappy. There's anger, and then we talked a bit earlier about alcoholism, just kind of, adding fuel to this fire, and people spiraling down, but still, what struck me is through all of that, the characters are each trying to do a good job. They're trying, whatever their job is, whether it's working in the bank, or whether it's being the detective, or even working in the barkeep. They're trying to do that job well, and people get in the way of them doing their job, which triggers some anger. And I think that's, it's a fascinating study because, as I said earlier, we're all flawed, but we're all also trying to do a good job. If we can recognize that in each other, and take a step back. Sorry, I don't know what the question is there, but...
Well, that's true, and I think that the characters are... And I tried to grab from a lot of these characters are all like conglomerations of people that I know. Sure. And I think that most people are driven to succeed in one way or another. Sometimes they don't have the proper dynamics to succeed and end up just kind of biting themselves over and over again, but they continue to try.
They continue to try, yeah. Where can people buy your book?
Well, this particular book is now on Amazon, and I think you can also get it through Goodreads, which are basic, book sales sites. And if you just look up Shadow Men, M-E-N, and my name, I think there's another book on there also called Shadow Men, or Man, I think it is. So you have to be careful with that. It's men, plural. And put my name in Al Julian. The book will come up.
Okay.
And I think we've got 17 or 18 reviews now, and they're pretty good. I think all but 2 have been 5 stars. We got, so that's good. I'm pleased about that.
Yeah, congratulations. I can attest it is a page turner. I didn't think I would be able to get through it in time for the interview, and I did, because it just kept me going. Back to Carrboro. What are some of your favorite things to do in Carrboro?
I love to walk around Carrboro. I'm surprised I haven't seen you before, but anyway, I like to walk around Carrboro. I've had Jack Russells for the last 25 years, and I had one for almost 18 years. I'd walk everywhere in town with him, and then for a couple of years I had to get over losing that particular dog. I got a new girl, and now I've had her for 5 years. We walk all over the place, so that's one thing I like to do, is walk around town, and just hang out. I'd like to hang out in different coffee shops, relax. I got a few friends that I spend, a fair amount of time with. And, anyway, and then I do a pretty good amount of writing, or if it's not writing, I'm pitching. And for people that are in the industry, they know what pitching means. It's like, trying to sell this stuff. And right now, I think I've also stayed pretty busy for the last 10 years. I've made at least 12 to 15 short films, and a couple of them, I've had several of them have shown here in the Carrboro Film Festival and different festivals around the state. So I'm usually in the middle of developing or making a short film, or I've made 2 features, and so I'm spending a lot of time with that too. That keeps me busy around town, because a lot of that's right here, right?
Yeah, the Carrboro Film Festival is coming up January 25th and 26th.
Yeah, it's later this year, I think. Yeah.
Stay tuned for more on that. Do you have anything showing this year?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. I've got 2 films shown at the Fuquay Film Festival, which is right near here, this coming weekend.
Oh, exciting. Yeah. Okay.
And that I'm looking forward to that. They have a really good turnout there, so I'll put a plug in for them. And for the Carrboro Film Festival also gets a good turnout. So people should come for that. Yeah,
it's one of our signature events in a town full of signature events. That is one of them.
Yeah.
So do you film mostly in the Triangle area, or mostly in North Carolina?
Yes. I did one film out in Austin, Texas, called The Reunion, which I did out there with my brother and a good friend of mine, who's now become a better friend of mine, Ken Bradley, who's also a very fine actor. He's in The Sessions, but he was also in Friday Night Lights as a regular and Fear of the Walking Dead as a regular. So I filmed that one film in Austin, and I filmed The Sessions that I spoke about earlier, the TV pilot, with my son-in-law, Vince Eisenson, who's also directed a bunch of my stuff, and he's also a very good actor. And we filmed that up in Silver Spring, near our mutual hometown of D.C. So everything else has been, I think, either in Carrboro or in the area, between Carrboro, Cary, Raleigh. I think we did one in Durham, so all around here.
Oh, wow. So folks going to the Fuquay Festival in those films, can they find shots in Carrboro?
They can, if they go on, how can they find it? If they go on like any of the social media stuff and just look.
Are there shots of Carrboro in those films that are showing this weekend?
Shots of Carrboro in the films? Let me think. There are 2 films playing that I have. The Sessions is one of the films that's playing there. If you want to see the film about the murderous groups that I ran, you could see it at the Carrboro Film Festival. So that's filmed in DC, in Maryland, and some in DC. But the other film is a comedy, and it was filmed, I think, in Cary. Okay. So if you know Cary, you might recognize some of that. Right.
Well, all right. We'll look for more coming up because you said the new one will be filming in Carrboro. That's going to be exciting. In general, North Carolina seems to be attracting more and more filming.
I hope.
I mean, doesn't it seem that way? I just now I'm not going to think of it because I'm on the spot, but there have been casting calls. There was something filmed on campus this summer. And it just seems to be, I guess it's a friendly environment for folks to set up here. I
think it's getting friendlier again. It's funny, when I first got into this area, this field, it was 2013-14, and North Carolina had really good film incentives, and Wilmington had 6 studios at that point. Now they have 1.
Oh.
Yeah, and what happened was, and I also did a little bit of acting. Anyway, so I went and I got involved. I signed on with an agency down here called Talent One, but I signed on with them in 2013. And there were a bunch of movies being made in North Carolina then, 2013-14, and I actually got little parts in a couple of them, which I was thrilled about. And the very next year, in 2014, we lost the film incentives. And now some have been reinstated. They're not quite as powerful or as incentivizing as the ones that were in place. But we're getting some more business coming back, which is good. So it's been slow. And for a couple of years, it was like a lot of people that I knew moved to Atlanta.
Yes.
And just to find work.
Spot. Yeah. Good. Well, I know that's important to the state's economy. Always trying to grow. So hopefully they'll be attracting more coming up. So, coming back to this one, Shadow Men, these themes, that we've been talking about, the aging, the anger that comes with losing respect and status as you age for some people, unhappiness in general, alcoholism kind of poured over that. Do those themes resonate in your subsequent novels?
Interesting. I think in the novel I'm writing now, there are some similar themes, but the themes I think are a bit different. I think the themes are about exploitation, identity in this new one, and acceptance. Coming to acceptance, struggling to accept someone that's very different, and that's in the one I'm writing lately. Now, the second novel I wrote was the dystopian sci-fi novel, and I think it's just a pure fantasy. I try to make likable characters or characters you'd care about, but they're not as much characters that I base upon people I really knew, because it's set in the far future. And but the one I'm writing now is more driven by, it needs to be psychologically correct, whereas the dystopian one doesn't need to be so psychologically correct. So this one I'm writing now is more about identity and inclusion, rejection, and finding acceptance. So that's plus it's an adventure as well. There's a lot of action in it too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it then different from the noir thriller genre?
Well, I'll give you a teaser. The title of it is Man's World.
Okay. Well,
and I'll give you just one teaser setting. It's set in a world, in some alternate probably reality, where a COVID-like disease has rendered, if a woman has a girl child, it ends up being fatal. So what's happened is, over centuries, there are now about 20 times as many men as there are women. And this is the society that has resulted from that. So it's all about this alternate society that's developed by virtue of that phenomenon. But anyway.
So interesting you said that, because a few minutes ago I jotted down a question for you about women characters, your women characters, and will we see some strong women characters? Do they emerge in this sort of dystopia?
Yes. Okay. The central character in this one is a young woman, and with a secondary central character of a young guy that unsuccessfully pines for her. But anyway, those are the central characters in this one. And I will openly admit that I look to both my sister and my wife to proofread my stuff, because I think it's difficult for a man to write really psychologically strong and maybe correct female characters. I feel like I'm okay at it because I've just known a lot of people and I've known them pretty well. Just as I think it's hard sometimes to put because writing, I think, takes the ability to really put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and it's hard to do when we're not the same sex. Whether it's a woman for a man for a woman. So anyway, I try to get feedback. A lot of times, I don't think thinking is all that different, but I think sometimes language and way of presenting is different. And it's easy to sound like a man, when you're writing a woman character, and it's too easy for me to slip into using the vernacular that a man might use in terms of his speech patterns. So I try to get that double checked. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, in Shadow Men, most of the women characters are victims in some way or another. A few are strong, and in fact, they're victimized when they show strength, or as a consequence of showing strength. And I think that's it. Well, I mean,
well, let me defend my lead character a little bit.
Yeah.
I think there are four. Well, I shouldn't give the story away too much, but I think that the victims are not killed so much for their sexual orientation as they are for their relationships that the killers had with them. And there is a victim that's a guy as well. That's also, I think, the killer in each. Without trying to give away my own story, but I think the killer is driven by what he or she perceives as disrespect, dismissal, rude behavior. There's a little bit of Hannibal Lecter in this character, right? I remember Hannibal Lecter killed somebody because they were off key in terms of the instrument they were playing in the orchestra, right? So there's a little bit of that in this character as well. It's an intolerance for any kind of disrespect.
This intolerance, yeah. Right. And then you're saying the novel you're working on now kind of is the opposite. Well, it's exploring similar themes in being an outsider and acceptance,
right.
Rejection and acceptance. So it's a similar theme, but maybe taken in a different direction or taken a different way.
Yeah, I think, and that unfortunately, in my Man's World story, it doesn't have I think in Shadow Men, without giving the story away too much here, I better not do that. But I think that I tried to find something at least a little bit uplifting, and I try to do that in Man's World as well. Although the ending is probably not going to be as satisfying for those that need a happy ending.
For those that need a happy, yeah. But
anyway, I guess I feel like I'm influenced by a kind of European writers that don't seem to need that in their storytelling or their movies so much.
Like Stieg Larsson.
Yeah,
we were talking about Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Yes,
yeah.
That is a ferocious tale. But I think that resonates with the kind of writing that I do. And it's a fairly graphic tale. I think probably a lot of your audience has seen the movie, that Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, that was made from the book. And it's a rough story, but it's psychologically, I think, fairly accurate in terms of the way that somebody that's extremely warped might behave. And I would call it a happy ending, but there's a resolution, and I think maybe even a bit of a lesson in it.
Your work and your writing is dealing with troubled characters, when after they've been well formed. They've been well formed in this drive of, what do you want to say, of self-harm or of harming others because of patterns of behavior. And I'm wondering, in your work, when you were in the murders groups, the therapy groups, and talking with them, if part of that work goes back to looking at the source of things, I believe no one is born wanting to hurt someone else, right?
I pretty much am convinced of that.
Yeah. So tell us more about that. Did your work reinforce that for you, lead you to be like, okay, nobody's born this way, things happen to this person, I believe that being in this group and talking it out, this can be helpful to some people? And I know you mentioned it doesn't work for everybody, but can you say more about that?
Yeah, sure. And I totally agree with you. It's just being in one of my lives as a psychologist, I was pretty familiar with. I did a lot of research too back in the day, and I was pretty familiar with some of the research on developmental psychology. And really, if anybody has an issue with this, I'd be glad to hear about it. But I think most of the research has shown that infants, there are only really two things that differentiates infants, and that's their level of activity when they're born, and maybe their innate intelligence level, but nothing else. There's no character yet. Mm-hmm. And so I agree with you. I think character is really a function of our environment, pretty much 99%. But you asked me about, I think I lost the other part of your question. But anyway, in the groups. Yeah, it's funny. In any kind of group therapy or any kind of therapy, if a person comes to see you in therapy, typically they're ready to take a look at themselves, right? Mm-hmm. But in a murderers group, there are a lot of people that they're not there because they're voluntarily there. Mm-hmm. I mean, they had to go to group therapy as part of what they were ordered to do. And there are a lot of people that are ordered to therapy that don't want to be there. Mm-hmm. And they typically do not want to take a look at themselves, which I think is essential if you're going to change, if you're going to really get to the heart of what's going on inside of yourself. And I think I'll take it at a personal level. That's something that helped me years and years ago. It was a decision to go ahead and get some therapy for myself. It was not an easy thing to do. I think for a lot of guys, it's not an easy thing to do. But I think it's essential if you're really going to try to get some insight in yourself and make some serious changes. So in the murderers group, I mentioned earlier there were some people that benefited by it, and I think those were the people that were anxious or depressed and therefore more motivated to do something about it. They were willing to take a look at themselves. They were willing to go back and develop some history, take a look at what had happened to them and why that might relate to how they are now and their general view of the world. Whereas if the more sociopathic of the individuals were not interested in looking back or looking inward, and so those people didn't change much. Mm-hmm.
But that pathology, the sociopathology, would have been something that is connected to how they were, their environment, their early environment, or something that developed for them.
I have to say, invariably, and how can I say this? I've really probably known quite a few murderers in my life, and I've never known one well, and I've known some quite well. That didn't have a very disturbed childhood. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people who have disturbed childhoods. Mm-hmm. Many of us did. I didn't have a perfect childhood. Many of us did. But you don't hardly ever get a false positive. Almost all these murderers had a very rough, disturbed childhood, and had terrible relationships with their parents. And it irritates me when I see documentaries now where they'll look at a murderer or serial killer, and they won't go into the history for some reason. It's I think we're there's part of society, and many of us that we don't want to look into the past that might explain the way that we behave. It's just this is just the way they are. No, it's not the case. So I guess to answer your question, I've never known a person that was seriously violent that didn't have a very disturbing childhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something right. But then it takes a desire for self-introspection, a desire to become to be different, to confront that part of yourself. You must have some serious courage to want to confront that part of yourself to be better. And I think that,
either courage or you have to be in a lot of hurt and a lot of pain. If you're in enough pain or enough hurt, enough anxiety, enough depression, enough negative emotion, you'll do something about it.
You'll do something. You'll self-medicate.
Or you'll self-medicate, right? Which many people do, and most of us would have that tendency. So
right. And in your book, many characters are struggling with alcoholism and trying to douse the flames of anger and injustice and all the hurt they're feeling.
Just not to think about what's going on.
Numb it. Yeah. Al, is there anything else you want to tell listeners about your work, past, current, looking forward?
Sure. Just if you're interested in the kind of things that I'm talking about, that I write about, you can find me on a bunch of social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram. But I think my Facebook page is just my name. And, of course, we're always looking for people that are interested to get involved in our productions, either as crew or actors or possibly co-producers. We're looking for people at all levels that might be interested. And I'll put another plug in if you'd like to see the film that was based upon the murderers group that I ran. And there are 6 characters, 6 people in this group. And I've changed the characters entirely so they don't look or have the same names or they have different backgrounds. But 5 of the crimes out of the 6 that are detailed were real crimes that occurred 40 years ago. And so that's and there's one that's fake. So anyway, but if you want to see what that group was like, what those people are like, I think we got it pretty much close with that film. And that's at the Fuquay Film Festival this weekend.
Great. Thank you. And so if people want to reach out to you to get involved, that would be through Instagram or Facebook?
Oh, yeah. I could give my email, too, if you'd like.
Go ahead,
My phone with that is P-R-O, and the number 4, T-E-S-T. So it's pro4test at AOL.com.
AOL. Great.
Yeah, and just reach out if you got an interest. I'll answer anybody. Almost anybody.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you so much
Julian,
for having me.
This was great. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We're looking forward to seeing what you create next. We're looking forward to seeing it filmed in Carrboro and maybe walking on, being in the background.
You certainly will be welcome. I'll make sure I reach out to you. Thank you, Jennifer.
Great. Thanks, Al. All right, everyone. So next week on the Carberrian Radio Hour, Monday, November 17th from 4 to 5, Jania Tingley introduces her segment, Control Alt Art, with an interview with local mathcore death metal band, Memoria. It should be a great show. Also, starting next week, the Carberrian will host a pop-up newsroom in the Drakeford building after the Carberrian Radio Hour. So you'll find us in the main lobby area, and you can come by to talk about what's happening in Carrboro, stories you'd like to hear, stories you'd like to tell. We'll be there each Monday from 5 to 6 p.m. following the Carberrian Radio Hour on WCOM 103.5. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Things on my mind.